Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, this how-to video, I wanted to show you a brief setup with the equipment that we have on how to do a very simple decomposition reaction. So as always, safety first. You would definitely need some safety glasses, some eyewear, aprons. You can use an apron if you'd like. You don't need to have one for this one, but you're more than welcome to wear one for this one. But if you have long sleeves, you would roll your sleeves down to help protect yourself and stuff. But at a minimum, we always need to have some eyewear. So in a decomposition reaction, what we want to do is we want to figure out how to. We need some sort of catalyst, or we need to change the environment in some way, shape, or form to cause the compound that is chemically bonded together to break apart into some component pieces. And depending on what substance we start with in the decomposition, and depending on the process, depends on the amount of how long it's going to take, the amount of time it'll take, and what the products would be. And so there's different classes of decomposition reactions, and I've got notes for you available on my site and on my channel. All that is there. There's notes. Make sure you watch that as well and work on some of those practice problems. So this one, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to be using heat, which is why I have this Bunsen burner right here. Okay, so let me move this back a little bit so you can see that. Got my ring stand and the iron ring right here, and then we're going to use something called a clay triangle. All right, and so it's called a clay triangle. You should be able to see why. That's the shape of a triangle. The clay part is this right here. So this is a ceramic. These are ceramic pieces right here. And the ceramic pieces are used much like you would think of how it would be used in a kitchen. They help to sort of control and mitigate, sort of regulate the heat, because along with that we'll be using this right here, which is called a crucible. This right here is a 30 milliliter crucible, so the volume of what it'll hold is about 30 milliliters. They come in various sizes. The the clay triangle sits atop the iron ring like this, and you'll notice that these iron rings, the corners right here look very much like the old wire hangers. The way they're sort of twisted up at the top, it's just mechanically twisted. And so these are adjustable. So depending on the size of the crucible that you're using, all right, you can adjust this so that the crucible will actually rest within there. And so about a third to no more than a half of it you want below. I like to go somewhere between a third and a half, not quite a half, maybe a little over a third. So I'll adjust it as such. And so the clay triangle will sit on top of the iron ring like that. And then of course you can always adjust your height so that the height of your iron ring is such that wherever your heat source is, it can sit there. Because in this particular reaction, we'll be using heat as our way to catalyze this reaction and to speed this reaction up. Because without it, this particular substance won't decompose. It'll just continue to absorb moisture. So it makes sense that that you would want the height of your iron ring to be at a point so that once you have your crucible resting in the clay triangle, that the flame would be touching this and touching it pretty closely. All right, so I'm going to bring that down just a little bit, and of course when you light this, you would always pull it away. So the substance, you find the compound that you're going to be using. Typically, what we're going to be working on, it's going to be some sort of powder. It's going to be some sort of solid component. Maybe not in powder form, but it's going to be some sort of solid component. All right. We would take that solid component. We would go and we would mass out what we need. You'd scoop out what you need. You'd put that solid component in here, and then from there you would begin to heat this up. Now you should never heat up the crucible if it's empty. Just so you know, these crucibles, there's this nice glossy outside, almost like a coffee cup or any ceramic dish, has that glaze over it. The top part of these and the bottom part are unfinished. They're not glazed. And the reason for that is partly to help mitigate some heat. to help relegate, because these things crack and break very easily. The other reason for that is the lid is unfinished as well on the edge, and when you never heat this up with the lid on. Never do that. That would create pressure, and these things would definitely break. But when you're done and you need to set this aside, well, so you can be doing something else, some calculations, maybe you're done for the day and you need to come back tomorrow, you got to let this cool off, whatever the case might be. Then off to the side, what you would do is you would rest this on top, but you would leave it sort of angled, so that there's an opening here, so that any residual heat that's here, any moisture that might be escaping, and any gases that might be escaping from the heating process can continue to do so. And any that condense on the lid would then kind of fall at that condensation would move at an angle over here and not drip back into the crucible where the substance is and be reabsorbed by the substance. Okay? This way keeps that separate. And it also keeps other debris from falling in. So that's the only reason for the lid. So between the times you're cooking your stuff, doing whatever, and you have to store it where we normally store it in the lab area, you would know how to do that. All right, so I'm just set that aside for now. And I'm going to I'll put a little bit of the substance in here, and that's only, I'm going to be honest with you, that's only because, like I told you, you don't heat up an empty crucible. All right, I didn't measure that out. This is just for training purposes. But in lab, you would obviously do the stoichiometry necessary to figure out what needs to go in there. Or if you're doing reverse, if you're told how much to put in there, you're just you're just figuring out how much product am I making, right? So depending on the class, depends on what your task is. Either way, you know how to do the math to figure all that out. Okay, so I would then set that in there. Got a striker, or you have a match. So if you have a match or other sort of lighting source like that, when you turn on your gas, you always come up from the bottom and then raise up. You never come straight above. You come up from the bottom and then straight up. And so I'm going to turn on my gas. I'll pull this a little further away. That is lit, and you can see that I've got a blue flame, tall blue flame, but it's not the most powerful blue flame possible. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to allow more oxygen in. If you allow too much oxygen in, it'll actually suffocate the flame because there's too much pressure. Or I'm sorry, if you let that in too much, there'll be too much pressure based on your gas pressure as well. And so you can always decrease that and regulate that with the on-off valve that they have to switch the regulator valve. So then you would come over here and you would set this up so this directly underneath it. And it needs to get red hot, like glowing campfire embers, red hot. And it will. The crucible and the clay part of the triangle, the ceramic part of the triangle, they will get red hot. And so if you've looked on my channel, you'll see that there is a background photo, and it looks like something like this. And that was actually a photo I took from some students who did this very same lab. And the background is the air shield that they built. Those ladies did a wonderful, wonderful job. One, the artistic work on that air shield, but two, their lab, beautiful results. So that picture was actually one of theirs. So if you were here, you would notice that the flame is hitting it, and it's starting to turn red. It's starting to glow. And you're going to cook this for a certain amount of time. The instructions tell you how long to cook it, and then you're going to let that sit. And then, of course, all of these reactions they're about mass. So before you had heated this up, you would have gotten the mass of your empty crucible. You would know the mass of your substance that you're putting into the crucible. After it heats, you turn the heat off. So let's just say we've gone as long as we need to. We turn our heat off. And now at this point, we realize we've got to let that cool off. And since there's air flowing underneath this, it'll cool off fairly quickly. These crucibles, they heat up quickly, but they also cool off very, very quickly. What you want to avoid doing is immediately grabbing it or thinking it's cool enough, taking it off there and putting it onto the lab table. These lab tabletops, they're very cool to the touch. they conduct the heat very nicely. So I could put like this Bunsen burner directly on this, and it's barely going to put a dent in it at all. I'd have to leave it there for like a long time to mess up the tabletop. These things are very, very sturdy. But it would absorb that heat very quickly. There'd be a huge change in temperature, and it could crack that. With that said, let's think about this before you heat it up. One of the things I've neglected to mention, but I'm thinking about it now, is anytime you're using glassware, an evaporating dish, a crucible, and you're going to be applying heat or anything at all for any reason, you should inspect it for cracks. These crucibles, they're used multiple times. They have a finite number of times they can be used before they literally just will crack and they can't be used. When that happens, we just get rid of it. We put it in our disposable area. So check, make sure that there are no cracks where you look at that and realize if this heats up and cools down too much, it'll pop, because these things will pop and then the entire bottom falls out and you got substance going everywhere. So that would be one reason why you may want to wear aprons. But at the same time, as you're doing this, you shouldn't be directly on it as well. So while it's heating up, there's nothing that says you're standing right here. You're just standing nearby and monitoring it. But always make sure you have your eyewear on. You would heat that up. You would let it cool down. You would get a mass reading, and then the instructions tell you you need a second heating. You would do the process again. You'd put it back on here. You would heat this up for the amount of time it tells you. And part of this is if you do your math correctly, you should have an idea of how long your second heating should be. If you understand your reaction where it's decomposing, and you're understanding the law of conservation of mass, that however much you start with is how much you end up with. If you understand your ratios of that, then you'll have a good idea of, well, if I heated this up for 5 minutes the first time, and I know that this is the mass of my product now after my first heating, you can then gauge about how long to heat it the second time to get it as close to that 100% yield as possible. So that's part of the recipe, and that's part of these is a very simple reaction. Decomposition reactions are typically a little easier to manipulate in a lab setting, or particularly with the substance we're going to be using. It's very easy to manipulate and get some pretty good results. So that's it. Set it up, heat it up. Well, set everything up. Get the mass of your empty dish as always, because your final reading will always have to be a mass by difference in some way. Heat it up, let it cool down, get a mass reading. Heat it up, let it cool down, get a mass reading, go back to your instructions, make sure you've got your reaction written correctly, so that all your stoichiometry, your dimensional analysis is correct. Figure out your percent yield, figure out your percent error, your actual yield, of course, your experimental yield, and then from there, we'll move on. Pretty simple lab, pretty straightforward. And of course, when you're done, you always look at the instructions and/or get with me or whoever your instructor might be, and then for proper disposal of the new substance that forms in this decomposition reaction. Hope that helped. Go work on those practice problems. I will see you in lab really, really soon. Stay curious, and I'll see you in another lesson video really, really soon. Bye.